It was Charles Dickens who coined the phrase never say never in his 1837 novel, The Pickwick Papers. Well, thanks to Dickens, hundreds of thousands of people have been able to move on from a project only to return again. So here we are, dropping content into your Leadville podcast feed. I say we, it's actually just me, Hottie, here. And I'm actually just following up on something Fatty said in our supposed farewell episode. He said, if Hottie wants to drop a show here or there, he is free to do so. So that's what I'm doing. A one-off show on a topic that consumes every Leadville racer.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. This is the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, Hottie to most. Good to speak with you folks again. I hope everything is going great in your training for this year's Leadville 100. You know, most listeners know that on this show, Fatty is more the conversationalist, and I am a bit more of the tech head. If Fatty prefers stories, I lean into technical stuff and gear. So you are probably not surprised to hear that this Hottie solo episode is going to focus on your equipment. In particular, one of the most hotly debated Leadville tech topics, and that is tires. Maybe you saw that I recently posted a tire survey on the Leadville 100 Facebook participants page. This episode is why. I recently came across a bike fitter who, in his spare time, has been field testing tires. And many of the models he has been testing are the same tires you might run at Leadville. We see all kinds of anecdotal claims made about tires. John Karrasch is attempting to answer how fast is that fast tire. This interview is divided into two parts. The first half, we discuss John's testing methods. It's pretty heady stuff, but if it's too much, don't worry. In the second half, we break down the top tires John has had in the field, and we discuss our survey results as well. All right, Leadville Racers, like we said, John Karrasch is our guest. John is a pro bike fitter with Cahaba Cycles in Birmingham, Alabama. He's also a coach with Ordinary Epics and a PT assistant. But the reason we have John on this show is because John has been deep diving into a topic that probably matters. It's right up there with us Leadville Racers, and that is tires. Yes, we're going to bring up the tire story again with Leadville Racers. Off-road tires, in fact, has been John's focus and how well they roll. He's been doing rolling resistance testing on some tires that you will recognize as Leadville Racers. John is steadily building a great database of tires, both gravel and cross-country mountain biking. So if you're into the gravel side of things or are one of these types who's been going, maybe I should put mountain bike tires on my gravel bike, John also has data that you might be able to use for that. But the real focus here is going to be Leadville and cross-country tires. John was on the Performance Process podcast. That's where I first heard about him, and I really trust Ronan McLaughlin, the host of that show, as someone who will vet a guest before he puts them on. So I know that John has the goods, and he can back it up. When we approached John, you were quick to tell me you had not done Leadville, which...
that was like the first thing I said.
And I said to John, I don't care. You're testing tires, and that's what we care. I assume, John, you know about Leadville, right?
Yes, very familiar. I've got fit customers throughout the year that are getting their bikes ready for the event, and they take it all very seriously because it's important to them.
Yeah, right. Well, someday maybe we'll get you out there and see if you can't strap a buckle around your waist too. Like it's a lot of fun. So again, welcome to the show, John. Why don't you give us a real quick, actually, your mountain biking experience then? What are you into as far as mountain biking or cycling in general?
Yeah, I started off mountain biking in 1999 or 2000, so been at it a long time. I grew up racing. That was when cross country was really hot in the U.S. So grew up racing a lot of shorter distance cross country, which would be called XCO these days. And when I got into college, ended up doing more longer races, partly just by virtue of getting really lost in Pisgah National Forest and realizing I could ride all day if I needed to. So just kept going with it. And that's kind of, I ride a little bit of everything: road, gravel, mountain bike, but racing wise, endurance mountain bike type of thing has always been probably my favorite and my strength there.
And Cahaba, and is that's a shop then, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I fit bikes there. That's 95% of my work. As you mentioned earlier, I'm a physical therapist assistant. I've still got my license, but I haven't worked in a clinic in probably 4 years or so. So all bike shop all day right now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. What led you down the road of testing knobby tires in their real world conditions?
Well, part of it is just the curiosity that everyone has just from sheer exposure to seeing pictures of everybody's bikes at events and bike check videos about them. And I didn't know what to think about it, honestly. I had used larger tires for most of my gravel racing in the past, but that's just my experience then. I don't have anything to prove it, really. In the fall of last year, though, I was without a gravel bike, so I ended up riding a hardtail with a rigid fork and the tire that most of your listeners probably are aware of, the Maxxis Aspen 2.4. And that was my kind of do everything bike then: gravel, mountain bike, whatever. And what got me interested in testing more was it was so much faster than I thought it would be almost everywhere. Even with the, whatever aerodynamic penalty a mountain bike would carry with it, bike was still pretty fast. And I just had a lot of questions about it. So started working on it and kept going and still going now. More questions with every test, probably.
Yeah, that's what happens in wind tunnels, for that matter. You usually walk away from a wind tunnel experience with more questions than answers. And I suppose when you're testing tires in the real world and putting data down, you're probably in the same boat there. CDA and CRR, and we're going to get into that, folks, in a second here, are kind of the same. They're kind of brother and sister in that, for that matter.
Yeah, they really are. And the thing is, if you started out with any of it knowing all the questions you would have, you'd never get started in the first place. So it's kind of good for them to come about organically like that.
So tire testing is, it's kind of this unknown dark secret. I mean, some of us know about maybe the bicycle rolling resistance steel drum type tests, and we've heard of those, but I think a lot of mountain bikers will say, yeah, but we got knobby tires. How does that matter to us? Tell us what kind of, since you don't own a lab and a steel drum and that kind of heavy equipment that's required, what kind of methods are you using to test tires and their rolling performance?
The method will sound probably unfamiliar to a lot of people and a little bit weird, but it's essentially just outdoor field testing on areas that I commonly ride, with the addition of what's called the Chung method, which is from Robert Chung. And essentially you're going back to high school physics class there with all of your equations for how much power it takes to move an object this distance at this hill. And so what you really have is all your inputs from like a power meter, speed sensor, air density. All those go into your fit file, which is what your Garmin or Wahoo would produce after a ride. And those are recorded every second. So with all of those inputs together, they are helping calculate you're left solving essentially there for rolling resistance and aerodynamic drag. So you're solving for X, with X in my case usually being rolling resistance. And with that many inputs at that many intervals, you end up with what is a very accurate way of doing this. And it also just the visual plot of virtual elevation, which is the other name for the Chung method. It kind of looks like a waveform from an audio file. And you can tell from the way it looks if you got a good test done or not. So that part of it is really helpful. It all sounds like really complex, and it is kind of behind the scenes with the equations and things. But as far as somebody doing it, I could show somebody in probably 30 or 40 minutes if they were with me, kind of how to do it in the most simple way.
Yeah, Robert Chung is a professor at UC Berkeley. He is also a cyclist, and one of the things he wanted to do as a personal project was figure out how to get wind tunnel information without the wind tunnel. And he did it. I mean, he developed his Chung method, which is also known, aka as virtual elevation. And as John described, it allows you to kind of suss out a certain data set if you want. Like if you're trying to solve, if X is CDA, you can solve for X using Robert's method, or if X is tire rolling resistance, you can do the same using Robert's method. And it's become quite reliable. Friend of the show, Josh Portner, who's Silka's CEO and also consults UCI Pro road race teams, is a firm believer in it. He's put it to use out there in the field with the pro teams when they've tried to decide what tire pressure they're going to run, or what tires are going to run, or what wheel set they need to run. It's a great way to do that and do it in the field, like in a real world environment. The Chung method can help you take all your wants and needs out into your conditions and try to solve, or at least narrow down some choices. Did I get that pretty much correct, John?
Yeah, that was great. And the thing is that it initially sounds like a roadie thing or a time trial thing. But what's cool is that it's pretty heavily used in mountain biking. There's one of the only published studies on virtual elevation or Chung method does involve mountain bike tires, actually. And I've also been told that the Swiss World Cup team, this is what they're using to prepare for Olympics and stuff like that when they're picking out equipment and pressures. So it's got a lot of relevance for riding off road for sure.
So take us to your courses. Again, you're in Birmingham, Alabama. What kind of courses did you seek out to try and test tires on?
So I've got 3 courses, 3 dirt courses. There's a category 1, 2, and 3. I tried to kind of keep them consistent with like the Silka tire pressure calculator, because that's already in use and it has a good visual for people, so there's a little bit of familiarity with it. So I started off with the category 2 course, and that one I started with because it was the most mysterious one. You can ride a tire down to a 35C gravel tire out there, or a road slick, and it's obviously not great. You might pinch flat it. Feels okay. But then from like a 40 mil tire all the way up to a 2.4, everything feels okay out there. So it leaves you with this big unknown, like, well, they all feel okay. What's better or not? So it gives a really, I'd say, kind of neutral testing ground for all those together. And I went ahead and with that one, I added a category 1, which is like a rails to trail sort of setup near my house, totally flat, crushed gravel. You can ride a road bike with 25s on there all day, no problems. Added that as kind of an in-between to it, like the roller drum testing you mentioned, bicycle rolling resistance and all that. And then I also added a category 3, which is pretty rough gravel with some roots and rocks and stuff. It's an area where I don't test anything under a 50 out there. I'm too scared of flatting it, and I have out there. And it's an area where you're more wondering like which short travel full suspension bike should I be using on this?
Okay.
So that one's got the most relevance, I'd say, for mountain bikers. There's the category 3 results.
Yeah. And at Leadville, the conditions are easily category 3. I mean, you get a lot of high speed, rocky descending, very fast. There's pavement, and there are, certainly a smooth gravel roads that I would say are probably your category 2. I don't know if there's any real rails to trail style stuff on the Leadville course. If there is, it's not a very big section. I'd say mostly it's for off-road 2 and 3, and then pavement too. So that would be the closest thing to your category 1 that they would have. And of course, the Leadville Racers would love to optimize for all 3, but usually what they're doing is somewhere in the middle there, trying to figure out, okay, what's the one that's going to do me best, or they optimize for the one that's going to keep them the safest or keep them from getting flat. So tire pressure. So how do you know that you've got the right tire pressure when you enter a test?
This is a really common question with this, and it's actually one of the easier parts, which is funny to me. So most people actually are intuitively pretty good at getting the tire pressure as the fastest one to get the best test result, uh, which is great news, because then you're left free to fine tune it to your subjective preference for handling and not getting a flat and all those sort of things. So I've done some pressure testing, and essentially, even if you miss the pressure by 1 or even 2 psi, kind of either way of optimal for speed, the rolling resistance is very close to identical. I'd say the margin is tiny there. It's a very like flat curve of kind of resistance coming off of that point. But as far as how I'm actually doing it, I like using the Wolf Tooth pressure calculator. I think it's called like Bike Tire Pressure app or something in the App Store. I like that one really well, and I usually use it's got different settings. I just use the rough gravel setting for kind of everything, and that's fastest even on like the rails to trails stuff, which is interesting to me. Kind of counterintuitive, but I do that, and I'll go ride some and let sometimes bike feels a little different after riding it for 10 minutes than when you get started, especially if it's warming up during the day. So if it doesn't feel quite right, I'll bump the pressure down a little usually, and then go ahead and do my test. And that gives I'm trying to get the best kind of result for each tire, and that's been successful with that. And from talking to other people, that's often how they do their stuff. Calculators are a starting point, but you gotta, to some degree, trust what you're feeling while you're riding.
And then one of the other variables is speed and power. Are you trying to ride at a specific speed all the time, or hold a specific power? Like, how do you suss out those variables?
So those are your inputs to the Chung method equation, and what you're actually trying to do there is you're trying to vary those throughout just essentially go ride. You don't want to use your brakes of this stuff, so you got to be careful picking out courses, but go ride back and forth or do loops and just go ride, vary speed some, vary power some. And what that does is it gives more inputs to those equations where it's figuring out kind of what kinetic energy or potential energy, all the high school physics stuff we hit on a little bit earlier. Those are all your inputs. So it gives a lot of inputs for the equation to figure out. It's kind of like if you were trying to teach somebody how to start wearing different clothes for different weather conditions outside on a bike. You'd want them to be exposed to a lot of different weather so they would learn what to do. That's what you're kind of going for here in a different way.
John, we mentioned bicycle rolling resistance. We have directed listeners to that site on a couple occasions just to get it's as a starting point, right? To look at, okay, here are kind of the rankings of tires. Here's who's coming in fast, who's not. But we all know that's happening on a steel drum. It's not real world. So give us kind of your impressions between, since you're somebody who's been out in the field testing tires, testing their rolling resistance, and looking at bicycle rolling resistance. Give us the pros and cons of each there, and what are some of the things you found out by comparing the two?
Here's what I've noticed is that they have a big variety of kind of pressure ranges when they test those tires on there, and I ignore a lot of that. I do look at their values that are around, for mountain bike tires. They have values that are around 25 psi, which is kind of where I would ride a mountain bike tire on the road. And I test most of these tires on the road also, and their results are pretty accurate for me. There's some small differences there, but they tend to hold up fairly well, and their kind of hierarchy of the rankings does tend to hold up fairly well on pavement. And oftentimes it's rare that a tire that's really highly ranked on there would be really slow, and it's kind of normal riding conditions. Like the cross country mountain bike tires on there, the ones that are really fast tend to stay pretty fast, but there are a few outliers in there for sure that I've found, and that probably just speaks to with how different actually riding off road is compared to a steel drum. So it's kind of nice to look at both things. You just have to have reasonable expectations for it. Those sites like that, they're not going to tell you everything. Okay, so you can definitely go too far, like over interpreting it, I would say.
One thing we didn't really get into is what makes a tire fast. I think I've asked this before with other guests before. Like, what makes a tire fast? Do you think that can be clearly defined based on how a tire is constructed? Is it can we say, just as a blanket statement, oh yeah, it's higher TPI count and a firmer compound? Like, is it that easy, or is there something more there?
No, it's not that easy. It's
okay.
I'll say this first, since you mentioned TPI. That's kind of threads per inch in a tire, and a lot of common conception of that is that low-end tires will have a low thread count. Like an OEM spec on whatever bike could have a 60 TPI casing, and most people just kind of assume that's slow because it's a lower number. And then if you get to a 120 TPI, you're starting to think, ooh, that's pretty fast looking there. And then 170, people's eyes will really light up. You're like, all right, let's go. This one's going to be great. But you can take 10 different 120 TPI tires and they can really drastically differ in their speed. And I will say that a couple of the fastest tires that I've tested off-road, the new Peyote from Vittoria and the Schwalbe Thunderbird that gets talked about a lot, those are both 60 TPI tires. And that's an interesting point there, just because it really speaks to the fact that really fast tires are really well-designed tires, and they're a package deal. So the people who are really good at designing this stuff, they're considering probably how everything works together, and the compound, the casing, the tread cap, kind of how those are balanced with each other, what'll give it the best speed and compliance over different terrain. So there's a lot of different things there that go into it.
And the makers will try to draw our eyes to certain things for sure, to try and say, okay, yeah, this is the faster tire, but without the test results, sometimes it's really hard to tell. Can we say for sure that a lower knob, especially in the center section of a tire, is a faster tire?
Sometimes.
Excellent. It depends, right?
It does depend on the tire, and that particular thing can lead people into picking a tire that they're giving up a lot of other characteristics with to get one that looks fast. And that's important to, I'd say, steer away from that a little bit. A lot of fast tires don't have, they don't, it's not going to look like a Minion DHF from Maxxis or something, or a Assegai Enduro tire. Stuff like that, yeah, you can look at it and say that thing's built for going downhill. But with cross-country tires, there's no guarantee that something that's almost like a semi-slick would be any faster at all than something with some knobs on it. And some knob patterns probably make them even faster off-road than if they were totally slick, which is the way they interact with the dirt or gravel or whatever.
Well, folks, we're going to get into some specifics here. We're going to talk about specific tires and tire results. First of all, I want to thank everyone who answered the survey questions over on the Leadville 100 mountain bike participants page. I'm going to talk about those results real quick, and we're also going to go over some of John's results, the tires he has, especially the tires we think are relevant to the Leadville 100. But we want to say this first, folks. This is not an attempt to tell you what to ride at Leadville this year or any year. This is not a ranking in which tire will hold up better. This is not a look at which tires hook up better. This is simply just one data point you can use to help you narrow in on what is right for you come Leadville Trail 100 Day. It may be that your tire is not even on the list that we're going to talk about here, whether it be the survey list that we just ran on the participants page or what John has tested. Go with what you trust. That's always the first thing we want to tell you on this show. But if you're curious about a particular model, then John's testing could be a great place to start. And his results are database or data-driven, which should also give you some assurance that, okay, this tire has been at least vetted in real-world conditions. But first, like I said, we've done a couple of tire surveys on the participants page just to kind of get an idea where people are leaning as far as tire choice at the Leadville 100. We ran one in 2023. And we aired those results, season 5, episode 14, by the way, folks, if you want to go back and listen to that. I think that the results were pretty obvious. I mean, Maxxis was the clear winner folks were really into that brand at the time. 54% of the survey results, survey participants said they would run Maxxis. The most popular was going to be the Icon of the Maxxis, followed by the Aspen. Now, this was pre-Aspen ST, so that model wasn't quite out there. Schwalbe was number 2. Then Conti and Vittoria were kind of sharing third place there. Specialized, and then Kenda. For Conti, by the way, folks, that was back before there was no Dubnital. It was only the Race King back there. And I think at the time, too, for Conti, they still had not kind of raised their presence. I mean, people knew the brand back then, but really weren't aware of how fast of a tire they were putting out there. We did have one racer come on and talked about how impressed he was with the tire, and I'm sure it kind of opened some eyes for folks too. So then we just ran a survey again now, folks. Again, thank you for participating for those who did. So here's how the numbers came out. And John, I'll have to tell you, I was quite surprised at kind of the change up in order here. The fact that Maxxis, and I think one of the reasons why is maybe, just not enough people have participated in survey number 2. That may be one reason. I think if the survey were up for a couple more months, we might see some of the rankings look closer to what they were in 2023. But Maxxis is now the 3rd most popular choice among Leadville racers, with Vittoria and Continental taking the top 2 positions. And of Vittoria, look like people are going to more than likely run either a Mezcal or a Peyote. I did see one vote for the Continental Race, which is an interesting tire, quite fast tire. And then Conti, you have the Race King, is still proving to be a quite popular tire. That's probably because the Dubnital, which was the number 2 Conti choice in our survey, has just come out. Like, that tire is just now reaching the marketplace. It's supposed to replace the Race King eventually. Then again, Maxxis was next, Specialized. Then Schwalbe. No Kenda showed up this time around. So that's how our survey results showed up this year, John. Anything jump out at you with those results?
Yeah, I thought they were, as far as the most current survey, I thought those were some good picks there. Those would definitely be on my list for picking out tires there. I think this partly speaks to maybe just one thing I want to hit on real quick is how much better these tires have gotten just from how technical World Cup cross country courses are now. They're harder to ride. A lot of demand from the racers and the bikes for good tires. So companies are really pushing hard with this, and we're seeing maybe the payoff for that for consumers now, with having better options that are faster, still grippy, still have good wet grip, which is always something I'm looking at. Particularly, Vittoria and Continental right up there. Those would be a couple of my choices for Leadville if I was heading out there, I think.
And again, I'm a little surprised that Maxxis has fallen out of the number 1 spot, because, I mean, there's no denying when you go to any start line, and especially at Leadville, at least up until this year, we don't know what's going on this year. That Maxxis logo is just all over the place. So I guess I'm a little surprised, but maybe the messaging is getting out now. John, is that what you're feeling? Like,
I think so.
At your level, at the bike shop level, do you feel that tide turning a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. I'd probably, out of all the bikes I fit in a year, half of them are off-road bikes. So they're mountain bikes, gravel bikes. So I get a firsthand view of what people are taking where to race them, and people are branching out some with tire choices. I don't know exactly what that's from, either the company's marketing or maybe just more discussion of it online. For one thing, that's people probably have maybe a more neutral starting point for picking out tires. I know that's the case for myself. I've ridden Maxxis tires a long time, and that's one part of testing all this stuff that was kind of hard for me, is breaking that like trust or whatever you have with your favorite tire to say, oh, let me go throw something new on and go ride it. But it's been a good learning experience just to try new things and to start, not just to get the test numbers on them, but to get these other little subjective bits that we come across riding that are different between these tires, even the ones that are fairly similar speeds. can do some different things out on the trail.
Well, let's talk about your results then, John. You've been at this since the fall. And again, folks, this is not a complete list. John's list is ever growing, and I would encourage you to follow him over on Instagram because he's constantly posting new tires. Some of them will be gravel tires, maybe that you have no business running at Leadville. Others will be cross-country tires that certainly you want to take a look at. So, John, give us some of your rankings and the tires you've tested and your personal feelings about them and what the data showed.
Well, let's kind of start with the category 3, like the rough stuff. I said earlier I thought that was most relevant to Leadville. And with those, the fastest one that's really hanging on there is Vittoria's newest Peyote in the XC race casing. Vittoria has a lot of different options. So the Peyote is only available in that one casing, but they also have a Mezcal in that new casing, the XC race casing. That's also, I haven't tested it, but I would imagine very similar speed with a little bit more grip to it. So that's probably worth mentioning. That one's right up there, barely below it. Actually the new Dubnital in a 2.4, and they have a lot of different compounds and casings for that tire. But I tested the Rapid Race, which is supposed to be the fastest one out of them, and it did prove to be very fast. Coming after that, these are all pretty tightly together here. Okay, so I don't want anyone to take the idea that this one's at the top and the others are just way down here, because that's not how it is with the ones I'm discussing at the moment. Then we'd have Maxxis's Aspen ST in that pretty thin 170 casing. That one's pretty good. And actually, I just finished up this morning Schwalbe's new Rick XC Pro Speed. That was a 2.25 and still really fast on the rough stuff. So I'm curious to get the 2.4 for that. I think that's going to be a pretty viable option right there.
What width did you test the Peyote, the Dubnital, and the Aspen ST?
Peyote was 2.4. Dubnital, I actually did a 2.2 and a 2.4, but the 2.4 is definitely faster on the rough stuff and definitely the pick there over the 2.2 in my opinion. Good tire. The Aspen ST it's labeled a 2.25, but this thing is monstrous. I measured it like 59.5 millimeters. So it's a big tire. The 2.4 probably measures like a 62. I haven't had a chance to do that one yet. Also, I should mention the Aspen 2.4, the regular tread Aspen and 120 TPI. That one's a little bit further down the list, but still in my opinion, pretty viable choice there.
With these top contenders, like, give us an idea of the difference, whether it be in speed or watts or however you can help us understand how tight these competitors are or how much gap there is. Could you help us with that at all?
Yeah, I'll say a few things on that. So one thing to realize that I've had people get kind of lost in these results with is that I'm only testing tires that I think are going to be pretty good and that I would ride. Kind of looking between like the Peyote and the Aspen there, the difference in those as far as, how the wattage would play out at a race like Leadville, for someone kind of mid-pack at Leadville, the time difference between those two tires is probably going to be 10 to 12 minutes for the 100-mile course.
You're talking between the Peyote and the regular Aspen, not the ST, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
But Peyote versus Aspen ST would be 5 or 6 minutes, maybe. That's pure rolling resistance. The other subjective handling stuff, that's kind of its own thing. But yeah, the rolling resistance is a pretty big deal. And with a normal kind of spread of rolling resistance for each category, you would be looking at Leadville tire choice probably impacting potentially up to like 30 minutes of variation of race time just from rolling resistance.
Is there anything on, one of the absences on your list so far would be Specialized. Now, Specialized, when I first started doing Leadville in 2011, was a big player there. Like, we saw a lot of fast tracks and a lot of renegades. Do you have interest in, like, what on our list draws your eye that you would like to test, that you're curious about?
Oh, Yeah, good question. I've been trying really hard to get the new air tracks in a 2.2 and had no luck. I don't think they're even out yet. I need to try the 2.35 air track because they seem like they're having success with those at the World Cup level so far.
And the air track, folks, by the way, is a Renegade with, I think, a shorter knob in the center section. I think that's how that tire is designed. I just looked at it for the first time the other day too. I haven't really.
Yeah, I think they have a little bit of a, like, they're using that Flex Light casing on the new one too. I'm not sure. So that one, my I want to test it. My impression is that it's probably pretty good. And one reason I say that is I've tested two of their new gravel tires, the Tracer and the Pathfinder, and both of those are, I would say, very good in that kind of specific gravel tire for gravel orientation. So I would probably take a good feeling from that for like the new mountain bike tires too, but I'm not totally sure there.
The racing,
and you mentioned Kenda too.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, somebody sent me a set of Kenda. What are these, Rush Pros? I've got a set of those mounted up to test soon. So I think they're probably a tire. They probably have some stuff in the mix that's pretty good that just doesn't get talked about a lot.
I tend to agree. They are under the current women's champ for the Leadville Trail 100, and Melissa Rollins. Like, she raced, I think she was on this. I don't know their tires that well. The Sabre Pro, is that their faster one? I believe it is. They have the Booster and the Sabre Pro.
I think the Sabre, yeah.
Yeah, she switched up to the Sabre Pros, as I recall, and went out and won on that tire. Alexei Vermeulen's on Kenda. So, a lot of fast folks ride Kenda, and that tire company cannot afford to be putting garbage out there. I mean, they have to have the goods too. Just because they're not really showing up on John's list or ours for that matter, doesn't mean you can't find a good fast tire with Kenda.
Yeah, and one thing I should say here is that people should definitely feel free to just call these companies up and talk to somebody in tech there and just ask these questions to them, because a lot of these people, they do know the tire lineup pretty well, and they can probably tell you kind of what might be a good bet to start with from their lineup for what you want to do.
Now, I noticed you mentioned the Racing Rick from Schwalbe. The Thunderbird has been, I mean, for somebody looking to go fast and not afraid. Schwalbe has a reputation, I don't know how well deserved it is, of being a little on the flat happy side. Like, people get a little gun shy with that tire because it's some people will tell you it has a tendency to get cut pretty easy, but the Racing Rick and the Thunderbird previously were both very fast tires. Has the Thunderbird been on your test course?
Yeah, it's super fast, especially on kind of easy gravel to medium gravel. By far the fastest thing I've tested. They do have a reputation for getting flats. I've been okay with that so far, but I'm somewhat careful with them. I wouldn't use them for any true mountain biking though.
Okay.
No way.
Thunderbird. Okay.
Yeah. And the new Rick XC Pro is the one I'm on right now with a 2.2. The 2.4 of that one, I think would be pretty viable for a lot of mountain bike courses.
If somebody were looking at your results here and saying, well, John is racing, or rather testing the fastest of the, fast tires, which includes probably thinner casings. And they said, well, yeah, I'm going to use his results, but I'm going to go with more protection. How much can that and or width, for that matter, say somebody wanted to go wider and add protection, like, what do you forecast would do to that tire from a performance standpoint, and how it ranks? Would it throw it way off the charts as far as going too slow, or what's going to happen there?
Going with like a more trail-oriented casing pretty much always makes tires slower. There's no way around it. So I would say there, the important thing is kind of consider like the rider history. If they're flatting stuff all the time, you might not want the thinnest casing out there. But if somebody's been riding a long time, good skill set, pretty smooth, they have confidence in that, I would definitely go for the lighter options as long as you have time to test it out thoroughly before an event. That's one of the most important things, is that you can kind of vet these tires yourself and prove to yourself that they're going to hold up. Now the width thing, the reason I think that a lot of people would go narrower on the width is the weight would always be a thing in your head there. Like, oh, I better get something a little bit lighter, a little bit better on the climbs. I think the better thing to look at is just the rolling resistance of the tires off road. And from what I've seen for true mountain bike conditions and even some gravel, a 2.4 is definitely faster than a 2.2. Also, probably better performance downhill, and even on the uphills. The trade off of getting the better rolling resistance is, I'll put it this way: for the what's the long climb in the middle of the course? It's really long. Is that
Yep.
Columbine? Yeah. So for that, for somebody going up that, to go from a kind of okay tire to a fast tire would potentially save them 2 minutes on that climb. Whereas going to a tire that was 100 grams lighter front and rear, so 200 total, that would only save them like 30 seconds.
All right. And how can that be, John? That's the thing. Like, I think most people would ask, like, how can a 2.4 be faster? That doesn't make sense to me.
For one thing, kind of the float over uneven or soft terrain like dirt, it's not sinking in as much and consuming energy. And just purely being bigger, it's also a little bit better adaptable to surface irregularities like rocks and roots and all that. It's definitely different from 10 years ago. And you can kind of see this trade-off at the pro cross country level with tires on those race bikes. Those are all a little bit heavier tires than 10 years ago, but significantly faster. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. And probably need to get the obvious thing out there, that sometimes a tire that's faster and bigger feels a little bit slower, so it can be deceptive.
Sure can. Yeah. Yeah. It's the same thing with us roadies back in the day. We always thought, okay, 115 PSI and 21s, that certainly feels fast. It did, but that's just your bike gyrating up and down. It feels fast, but it just isn't. We're being deceived by what we feel, that's for sure. And tires can do a great job of that. So again, folks, I really want you to, if you're interested in this stuff and understanding what the benchmarks are here as far as speed and trying to make tire choices as using that as a starting point, I want you to make sure you go and check out John's Instagram page, where he's constantly posting new tires with new data. Now, that said, John, I look at your charts quite a bit, and sometimes I'll have to admit, it's a little head spinning experience. I'm like, hey, what's all that? So give people an idea how they should read their charts, especially if they're going to see a lot of numbers with decimal points and go, I don't understand what that means. So how should they use their charts, especially if they're just pretty new to this stuff?
Okay, so people have options with this here. That's I did it a certain way because of that. When you first look at it, it's going to have a lot of decimals as far as the coefficient of rolling resistance. Sounds like a bunch of nonsense and too small numbers to mean anything. But if you go to one of these online calculators like gribble.org, you can put in all these different values of your course characteristics and that coefficient number, and it can show you kind of how the wattage would change for a given power level and speed. So that's pretty interesting. And also, I've tried to put together the rankings in just terms of kind of how many watts the set of tire consumes at a given speed. And that's something that's right in front of people's faces with a power meter that ride with one. And they can see, okay, this set's gonna be 10 watts faster than the next set. That's pretty solid. But then if they're seeing that they're just sweating bullets between two tires that are 1 watt apart from each other at 18 miles an hour, that's a very, very small difference. So you don't have to necessarily worry about it that much there, and just pick what you like.
Can rolling resistance, we talked on our marginal gain show, we talked a lot about when aerodynamics matter. And generally, you have to be up to speed. Like, it's usually over 13 miles per hour when you really should start paying attention to aerodynamics. Can we say anything about rolling resistance in the same vein there? When does rolling resistance really start to matter? Is there a speed threshold that really makes a difference? Like you talked about 18 miles per hour there. Is there a speed threshold for rolling resistance, or does it always matter?
It always matters. It always matters. Even, I said for somebody mid-pack at Leadville, tire choice could make the difference of maybe 30 minutes on the day. Whereas for somebody averaging 17, 18 miles an hour, it could make the difference of 10 to 12 minutes. But if you told them it's only 10 or 12 minutes, that's a lot of places there to make up. So as far as, but then to come back to kind of at what point does it matter? The slower somebody is out there or towards not the front end, the more value rolling resistance has to pay attention to. Okay. So it's important for everybody, but somebody that's not going as fast where the aerodynamics matters a lot, rolling resistance is a incredibly important thing. So it always matters, and it matters to all levels of riders. And one thing here, I mentioned earlier that tires are a package deal. People often think that, there's these choices between a fast tire that's just going to slide out everywhere, and then this really grippy tire that's slow everywhere. But in reality, there's a lot of really fast tires that also grip pretty well and are comfortable. So you can potentially end up with a really good package deal by being kind of careful what you're picking.
Let's come full circle in this. We opened the show talking about testing and about how you test. If somebody wants to try and carry out testing on their own, give us an idea. Can anybody carry out a chunk test, or would you have another way of going about trying to test your own tires?
If somebody has a power meter, yes. If somebody has a power meter and a course that's free of traffic, like you said, they can do it themselves. The one that I really like is, I call it like a half pipe, but it's where if you were coming down kind of a 2 or 3% downhill that would flatten out, then transition to an uphill on the other side, you can kind of do loops of that back and forth without using your brakes, using the uphills to kind of slow you down to make the turns. So if you turned at the same point on each side, you could use that for just do 10 minutes worth of it and upload your file and take a look at it. And that can tell you pretty quickly back and forth what tires would be faster for the surface you wanted to test on.
Well, John, it's an ever-growing list, right? I mean, you're going to keep going with this stuff. We can keep watching your site for new tires all the time. You're not burned out yet, huh?
Yeah, and I'm really trying to just fill in a gap here with everyone's got all their subjective experience and their bike handling, all these things like that, but actual numbers for how fast these tires roll off-road, that's something we didn't necessarily have before. So I hope this can just be an addition to people's tire selection with their own experience they've already had.
Well, John, thanks for coming on and trying to help us solve what is a massive question for the Leadville Racer, and that is tire choice. Again, folks, I don't know. I hope we helped a little bit here. This is not a tire recommendation. We are simply ranking a few of the best, fastest tires out there. And John, thanks for trying to help us solve this question. It's a big one.
Yeah, thanks, Ike.
Thanks again to John Karrasch of Cahaba Cycles. Like we said, John's tire testing is ongoing, and the results are free. Just give him a follow on his Instagram page at FlexFitByJohn. He's also great at replying in the comment section should you have further questions. The website John mentioned, where you can convert a rolling resistance figure into watts, is Gribble, GRIBBLE.org. I'd also like to say, don't overthink this stuff, folks. Yes, tires are a big deal, and most of you are going to be able to choose them without knowing your tire's CRR value. That's great. But if you are on the fence or you are rolling resistance curious, then John is a resource to check in with. In the meantime, we hope your Leadville preparation is going as planned. Fatty sends along his best, as always. Good luck in your training and racing, and we'll see you at the starting line.